They said a documentary producer could never survive in corporate law. They said my Emmy was just a pretty paperweight in a world of legal briefs and billion-dollar contracts. They said I'd be gone within 6 months, another career changer who couldn't handle the pressure of Manhattan's most ruthless law firms. They were wrong. Dead wrong. And when Robert Patterson, CEO of one of America's largest entertainment companies, sat across from me in that boardroom, dismissing my analysis of his predatory contracts, I knew exactly what I had to do. I excused myself, walked to my office, grabbed my Emmy Award, and returned to that meeting room. "Mr. Patterson," I said, placing the golden statuette on the mahogany table between us, "this represents 10 years of exposing corporate exploitation in the entertainment industry. Now let me show you why your contracts are about to cost you everything." The room went dead silent. And that's when my real legal career began. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Whitmore and Associates as I walked through the marble lobby, my heels clicking against the polished stone. At 34, I was starting over, again. The weight of my briefcase felt heavier than usual, not because of the legal documents inside, but because of what it represented, a complete career transformation that most people thought was impossible. 6 months ago, I was Livia Loren, Emmy-winning producer for investigative documentaries. My work on Hidden Truths, Corporate Whistleblowers, had earned me the highest recognition in television journalism. The golden statuette still sat on my apartment shelf, a reminder of a life that felt increasingly distant. But the media industry's volatile nature had claimed another victim when my production company folded overnight, leaving dozens of talented professionals scrambling for new opportunities. "You must be our new paralegal," said a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who approached me near the reception desk. Her tone carried that particular condescension reserved for those she considered beneath her station. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, Senior Associate. I'll be overseeing your work." I extended my hand professionally, keeping my voice steady despite the immediate misclassification. "Actually, I'm Livia Loren, the new Junior Associate. I start today in the Media Law Division." Jennifer's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of surprise followed by what looked suspiciously like annoyance. "Oh. Right. Well, follow me then." She turned on her heel without waiting for a response, her auburn hair swaying as she walked briskly toward the elevators. The 32nd floor housed the Media Law Division, a smaller section of the firm that handled entertainment contracts, intellectual property disputes, and defamation cases. As we walked through the open workspace, I noticed the curious glances from other associates and paralegals. Some seemed genuinely interested, others appeared skeptical. "This is your office," Jennifer said, gesturing to a small space with a decent view of the Hudson River. "Don't get too comfortable. Most career changers don't last 6 months here. The legal profession isn't like television, we deal in facts, not stories." I set my briefcase down carefully, maintaining my composure despite the obvious slight. "I appreciate the guidance. I'm looking forward to contributing to the team." "Right." Jennifer checked her watch, a gesture I would soon learn was her signature move when she wanted to end a conversation. "You'll be working on document review for the Patterson Entertainment case. Boxes are already in your office. Try to keep up." After she left, I sat in my new chair and surveyed the space that would become my professional home. The walls were bare, waiting for diplomas and awards that would legitimize my presence here. Outside my window, the Hudson River flowed steadily southward, carrying everything in its path toward new destinations. My phone buzzed with a text from my former colleague, David Kim. "How's the first day in legal land? Remember, you're not just representing yourself, you're proving that media professionals can excel anywhere." I smiled, remembering David's pep talk the night before my law school graduation. He had been one of the few people who supported my decision to pursue legal education while working in television. Most others thought I was crazy for earning my JD part-time over 4 years, studying contracts and torts while producing documentaries about corporate malfeasance. The Patterson Entertainment case file sat in 3 large boxes beside my desk. As I opened the first one, I recognized the familiar thrill of investigation that had driven my documentary work. Legal discovery was just another form of storytelling, finding the narrative thread that connected disparate facts into a coherent argument. The case involved a dispute between Patterson Entertainment and several content creators over streaming rights and revenue sharing. As I read through the contracts and correspondence, patterns began to emerge. Having worked on the production side of media deals, I could see issues that pure legal training might miss, industry practices that were considered standard but potentially problematic from a legal standpoint. Burning the midnight oil already? I looked up to see Marcus Chen, another junior associate, standing in my doorway with 2 cups of coffee. He had a friendly face and an easy smile that seemed genuine rather than calculated. "Just trying to get oriented," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Thanks for this." "No problem." I heard you came from television production. That must be a significant adjustment. It is, but not as different as people think. Both industries involve complex negotiations, tight deadlines, and managing difficult personalities. Marcus laughed. You'll fit in fine then. Don't let Jennifer get to you. She's territorial about the media law division, especially since it's become more profitable in recent years. I appreciate the heads up. Any other survival tips for the new person? Yeah. Remember that everyone here earned their position, regardless of their background. You graduated from Columbia Law, that's no accident. You belong here as much as anyone. After Marcus left, I returned to the Patterson files with renewed focus. The contracts revealed a pattern of increasingly restrictive terms for content creators, while Patterson Entertainment retained broader rights than industry standards typically allowed. My documentary experience had taught me to look for systemic issues rather than isolated incidents, and this case appeared to be part of a larger strategy to exploit creators' limited legal knowledge. By 7 p.m., most of the office had emptied out. The cleaning crew moved quietly through the hallways, their work invisible to the lawyers who would return tomorrow morning expecting pristine workspaces. I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to prove that my work ethic matched my ambition. The rain had stopped, and Manhattan's lights sparkled across the darkening sky. From my window, I could see people leaving office buildings, heading home to families or social obligations. My own apartment waited emptily in Brooklyn, another reminder of the sacrifices that came with career transitions. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed my mother's number. Mija, how was your first day? Her voice carried the mixture of pride and concern that had characterized every major milestone in my life. It was good, Mom. Challenging, but good. Are they treating you well? You worked so hard for this opportunity. I smiled, thinking of Jennifer's dismissive attitude and the boxes of documents that awaited tomorrow's review. There's definitely an adjustment period, but I expected that. Change is never easy. Remember what your father always said, respect is earned through action, not words. Show them what you're capable of. After we hung up, I gathered my things and prepared to leave. The Patterson case had given me an idea for my first contribution to the media law division, but I would need to research similar cases and industry precedents before proposing any new approaches. As I waited for the elevator, I reflected on the day's interactions. Jennifer's skepticism was obvious, but not entirely unreasonable. Career changers did face higher failure rates in demanding professions like law. The difference was that most career changers hadn't spent years developing investigative skills that translated directly to legal work. The elevator arrived, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. My reflection in the polished steel doors showed a professional woman in a well-tailored suit, but I knew that appearances only told part of the story. The real test would come in the weeks and months ahead, as I proved that my unconventional background was an asset rather than a liability. Tomorrow, I would dive deeper into the Patterson Entertainment case and begin building my reputation one document, one argument, one client interaction at a time. The Emmy sitting on my apartment shelf represented past achievements, but the real prize would be earning respect in this new professional environment through competence, dedication, and results. 3 weeks into my tenure at Whitmore & Associates, I had developed a rhythm that balanced legal rigor with investigative instincts. The Patterson Entertainment case had become my primary focus, and what I discovered in those document boxes was more troubling than anyone had initially realized. Livia, Conference Room 3. Now. Jennifer's voice cut through the morning quiet of the media law division. Her tone suggested this wasn't a casual meeting. I gathered my Patterson files and headed to the conference room, where Jennifer sat with Robert Patterson himself, a man in his early 60s whose silver hair and expensive suit couldn't mask the tension in his shoulders. Beside him sat his personal attorney, Michael Brennan, whom I recognized from his frequent appearances in entertainment industry publications. Mr. Patterson, this is Livia Lauren, the associate handling your document review, Jennifer said, her introduction feeling more like a warning than a welcome. Patterson's handshake was firm but brief. Ms. Lauren. I hope you're finding everything in order with our contracts. I maintained professional composure despite knowing exactly how out of order things actually were. The documentation is comprehensive. I've been analyzing the revenue sharing structures and rights assignments. Good, good. Michael here tells me that everything should be straightforward. A few disgruntled creators trying to renegotiate deals they already agreed to. Brennan nodded confidently. Standard industry pushback. Creators sign contracts, then complain when they're held to the terms. Nothing we haven't handled before. I exchanged glances with Jennifer, who seemed to be studying my reaction carefully. This was clearly a test. Would I simply agree with the client's characterization, or would I present my actual findings? Actually, I've identified several patterns that might complicate that narrative, I said, opening my folder. The contracts contain escalating penalty clauses that weren't standard when most of these agreements were signed. Additionally, the rights reversions are structured in ways that make it nearly impossible for creators to reclaim their content, even under circumstances that industry standards would typically recognize. The room fell silent. Patterson's expression shifted from casual confidence to sharp attention. Brennan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Brennan asked, his voice carrying a warning edge. "I'm suggesting that we need to consider how these contracts will appear to a judge who might not be familiar with entertainment industry practices. Some of these terms could be characterized as unconscionable, especially given the significant disparity in bargaining power between Patterson Entertainment and individual creators." Patterson leaned forward. "Ms. Lauren, I've been in this business for 30 years. These are standard industry practices. Mr. Patterson, I spent over a decade in television production before law school. I've negotiated hundreds of these agreements from the other side. What you're calling standard practice would be considered predatory by most industry professionals." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Jennifer cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Livia, perhaps we should discuss this internally before." "No," Patterson interrupted, his eyes fixed on me. "I want to hear what she has to say. You have experience on the production side?" "Yes. I was an Emmy-winning documentary producer before transitioning to law. My work focused primarily on investigative pieces about corporate practices and their impact on individual employees or contractors." Patterson and Brennan exchanged glances. I could see the calculation in their expressions, whether my background made me more dangerous or more valuable to their case. "What would you recommend?" Patterson asked, his tone now more cautious than dismissive. I opened my notebook, which contained 3 weeks' worth of analysis. "I recommend renegotiating the most problematic clauses before this goes to court. The creators have legitimate grievances about penalty structures and rights reversions. If we can address their concerns proactively, we avoid the risk of a judge ruling that these contracts contain unconscionable terms." "That could set a precedent that affects all our creator agreements," Brennan said. "It could also prevent a court ruling that invalidates your existing contract structure entirely," I countered. "Sometimes strategic concessions prevent larger losses." Patterson sat back in his chair, studying me with new interest. "You think like a producer, not just a lawyer." "I think like someone who's seen how these disputes typically resolve when they reach litigation. The creator's legal team isn't weak. They've hired Morrison and Associates, and Livia Morrison specializes in entertainment law. She knows exactly how to frame this narrative for maximum impact." Jennifer finally spoke up. "What kind of narrative?" "Big entertainment company exploits individual creators through predatory contracts. David versus Goliath. It's compelling, and it's not entirely inaccurate based on the contract terms." The meeting continued for another hour, with Patterson and Brennan gradually accepting that their initial strategy might need adjustment. As we wrapped up, Patterson asked to speak with me privately. "Ms. Lauren, your analysis is thorough. I have to admit, I wasn't expecting that level of insight from someone new to the legal profession." "Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Experience in the industry provides context that pure legal training sometimes misses." "Indeed. I'm curious, why did you leave television production for law?" I considered my answer carefully. I realized that understanding how these industries work from a legal perspective could help me make a more significant impact. Media law sits at the intersection of creativity and commerce, and that intersection fascinates me. Patterson nodded slowly. "Well, you've certainly made an impression today. I look forward to seeing how you handle the next phase of this case." After he left, Jennifer and I remained in the conference room. Her expression was unreadable, which somehow felt more ominous than outright disapproval. "That was quite a performance," she said finally. "It wasn't a performance. It was legal analysis based on industry knowledge and case precedent. Don't get cocky, Livia. One good meeting doesn't make you irreplaceable. This firm has handled high-profile entertainment cases for decades without needing former television producers." I gathered my files, maintaining professional composure despite the clear hostility in her voice. "I understand. I'm here to contribute, not to overshadow anyone." "Good. Because tomorrow, you'll have a chance to prove that your analysis was more than just theoretical. Patterson wants you to attend the mediation session with Morrison and Associates. Let's see how your production background holds up under cross-examination." That evening, I worked until nearly midnight preparing for the mediation. The creators' demands were extensive, but not unreasonable given the contract terms they were challenging. Livia Morrison had done her homework. Her brief was thorough, well-researched, and devastating in its critique of Patterson Entertainment's business practices. I found myself in the unusual position of agreeing with many of the opposing counsel's arguments while still representing Patterson's interests. It was a delicate balance that would require careful navigation during tomorrow's session. My phone rang around 11 p.m. David Kim's name appeared on the screen. "Burning the midnight oil again?" he asked when I answered. "Preparing for my first mediation. Big case, high stakes. Sounds familiar. Remember when we were preparing for the Meridian Corporation exposé? You spent 3 weeks analyzing their financial filings before we even started filming." I smiled, remembering the documentary that had ultimately led to congressional hearings and significant regulatory changes. "This feels similar, actually. Complex corporate structure, questionable practices, individuals getting exploited. Except now you're on the inside, working within the system instead of exposing it from the outside. Sometimes the best way to create change is from within. Just don't lose yourself in the process, Livia. The industry needs people who remember what it's like to be on the other side." After we hung up, I returned to my preparation materials. David's words stayed with me as I reviewed Morrison's brief and Patterson's contract terms. Tomorrow's mediation would test not just my legal skills, but my ability to navigate the ethical complexities of representing clients whose practices I might personally question. The Patterson case was becoming more than just a professional challenge, it was forcing me to define what kind of lawyer I wanted to be and how I would balance zealous advocacy with personal integrity. The Emmy on my apartment shelf represented storytelling that exposed injustice. Tomorrow, I would discover whether legal practice could achieve similar outcomes through different means. The offices of Neutral Ground Mediation Services occupied the 40th floor of a midtown skyscraper, with conference rooms designed to project calm professionalism while hosting some of the city's most contentious legal disputes. I arrived 30 minutes early, using the extra time to review my notes and mentally prepare for what could be the defining moment of my legal career. "You look nervous," Jennifer observed as she joined me in the lobby. She carried herself with the practiced confidence of someone who had navigated dozens of high-stakes mediations. "Focused," I corrected, though she wasn't entirely wrong. The weight of representing Patterson Entertainment while harboring serious reservations about their contract practices created a tension I was still learning to manage. "Remember, we're here to minimize damages, not to validate the other side's narrative about corporate exploitation. Patterson pays our bills, not the content creators." I nodded, understanding the reminder while privately noting its implications. The elevator ride to the 40th floor passed in silence, each of us lost in our own preparation strategies. The mediation conference room was larger than I had expected, with a polished mahogany table that could seat 20 people comfortably. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of Central Park, though I suspected most participants would be too focused on the proceedings to appreciate the scenery. Livia Morrison arrived with her clients 10 minutes after us. I recognized her immediately from her reputation, sharp, methodical, and known for her ability to frame complex legal issues in emotionally compelling terms. The 3 content creators accompanying her looked exactly like what they were, talented individuals who had built significant online followings only to discover that their contracts with Patterson Entertainment were far more restrictive than they had understood. "Livia Lauren," I introduced myself as Morrison approached our side of the table. "I don't believe we've met." "Livia Morrison. I've heard interesting things about your background. Documentary production, correct?" "That's right. It's given me some unique perspectives on this industry." Morrison's smile was professional but not unfriendly. "I imagine it has. Should make for an interesting discussion." The mediator, retired Judge Harold Steinberg, entered precisely at 9 a.m. His reputation for efficient, no-nonsense sessions was legendary among New York's legal community. After brief introductions and procedural explanations, he invited Morrison to present her client's position. "Your Honor, this case represents a systematic pattern of exploitation that has become unfortunately common in the digital content industry," Morrison began, her voice carrying the measured authority of someone accustomed to commanding courtroom attention. "Patterson Entertainment identified creators with limited legal resources and negotiated contracts that appear reasonable on the surface but contain penalty structures and rights assignments that effectively trap these individuals in permanent disadvantageous relationships." She gestured to her clients. "Marcus Williams created a technology review series that generated over 50 million views for Patterson's platform. Under his contract, he received less than 8% of the advertising revenue, while Patterson retained permanent rights to his content format and personal branding elements. When Mr. Williams attempted to negotiate more favorable terms after his success became apparent, Patterson invoked penalty clauses that would have cost him nearly $300,000. The presentation continued for 45 minutes, with Morrison systematically dissecting each problematic contract element. Her preparation was impeccable, and her arguments were devastating. Worse, from my perspective, they were largely accurate. When Judge Steinberg invited our response, Jennifer looked at me expectantly. This was my moment to prove that my unconventional background was an asset rather than a liability. Your Honor, Ms. Morrison presents a compelling narrative, but it mischaracterizes both industry standards and the actual terms of these agreements, I began, standing and moving to the presentation screen. I spent over a decade working in content production before transitioning to legal practice, including direct experience negotiating creator agreements from the production side. I clicked to my first slide, which showed industry standard revenue sharing percentages across different platform types. The revenue splits Ms. Morrison characterizes as exploitative are actually within normal ranges for creators at the experience level her clients possessed when they signed these agreements. Content creation is a high-risk industry where platforms invest significant resources in promotion, technical infrastructure, and audience development. Morrison interjected, but surely the penalty clauses are consistent with standard contract protections for intellectual property development, I continued. When Patterson Entertainment invests in creator development, promotional campaigns, and audience building, they need assurance that creators won't immediately leave for competitors after benefiting from that investment. Judge Steinberg leaned forward. Ms. Lauren, are you arguing that these contracts are entirely reasonable, or that they reflect problematic industry practices that happen to be widespread? The question cut to the heart of my ethical dilemma. I could defend Patterson's practices as legally standard, or I could acknowledge the broader industry issues while still advocating for my clients' interests. Your Honor, I'm arguing that these contracts reflect complex industry realities that require balancing creator flexibility with platform sustainability. However, I paused, knowing that my next words would surprise everyone in the room. I also believe there are opportunities for improvement that would benefit both parties. Jennifer's sharp intake of breath was audible. Patterson himself looked puzzled. Morrison appeared intrigued. What kind of improvements? Judge Steinberg asked. I clicked to my next slide, which showed a proposed contract modification framework I had developed during my late-night preparation sessions. Revenue sharing structures that escalate based on content performance metrics. Rights reversion clauses that activate after specific time periods or view thresholds. Penalty modifications that account for creator success levels achieved after contract signing. You're proposing to redesign the entire agreement structure? Morrison asked, her tone suggesting professional respect despite our opposing positions. I'm proposing to address the legitimate concerns raised by Ms. Morrison's clients while preserving Patterson Entertainment's reasonable business interests. Both sides have valid points that don't have to be mutually exclusive. The room fell silent. Judge Steinberg made notes on his legal pad while both legal teams processed the unexpected direction of my presentation. Patterson requested a brief recess to confer with his legal team. In the hallway outside the conference room, Jennifer's composure finally cracked. What the hell was that, Livia? You just gave away half our negotiating position. I presented a solution that addresses the real issues in this case while protecting our client's core interests. Our client hired us to defend his existing contracts, not to redesign them based on your personal opinions about industry practices. Patterson approached before I could respond. His expression was thoughtful rather than angry, which somehow felt more ominous. Ms. Lauren, that was unexpected. You're essentially arguing that my contracts need significant modifications. Mr. Patterson, I'm arguing that strategic modifications now prevent more significant losses later. Morrison's arguments are legally sound. If this goes to court, there's a substantial risk that a judge will find some of your current terms unconscionable. Voluntary modifications demonstrate good faith and preserve your ability to maintain similar agreements with other creators. Patterson studied me for a long moment. You're not arguing like a typical corporate lawyer. No, I'm not. I'm arguing like someone who's seen how these disputes typically resolve and wants to achieve the best possible outcome for your business interests. When we returned to the conference room, Morrison presented her client's specific demands. As I had predicted, they were substantial but not unreasonable given the contract issues we had identified. Your Honor, I said when invited to respond, Patterson Entertainment is prepared to consider modifications to the current agreements that address the creator's primary concerns while maintaining reasonable protections for platform investments. The next 3 hours involved detailed negotiations over specific contract terms. My production background proved invaluable in understanding which creator demands were essential versus negotiable, while my legal training helped structure modifications that achieved practical solutions. By late afternoon, we had reached a preliminary agreement that satisfied most of both sides' core interests. The creators would receive improved revenue sharing and modified penalty structures, while Patterson retained reasonable protections for their platform investments. As we prepared to leave, Morrison approached me privately. "That was impressive work today. You found solutions that pure legal advocacy often misses." "Thank you. Complex problems sometimes require creative approaches." "I have to ask, are you satisfied representing corporate interests, or do you ever miss advocating for individuals?" The question hit closer to home than I had expected. I believe good legal representation can serve justice regardless of which side you're on. Today felt like we achieved something positive for everyone involved. Indeed. Well, if you ever decide you want to switch sides, call me. The industry needs lawyers who understand both perspectives. On the elevator ride down to street level, Jennifer and I rode in silence. The mediation had been successful by any reasonable measure, but I knew that my approach had created new tensions within the firm. "Patterson wants to speak with you tomorrow morning," Jennifer said finally. "First thing. About the settlement terms? About your future with this firm?" That evening, I called David Kim to debrief the day's events. His response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Livia, you found a way to serve your clients' interests while addressing systemic industry problems. That's exactly the kind of legal practice the entertainment industry needs. I'm not sure everyone sees it that way. I may have made some enemies today. You may have also made some allies. Change is never comfortable, especially for people benefiting from existing systems." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment looking at the Emmy on my shelf. The mediation had felt like a return to my documentary roots, investigating complex problems, understanding multiple perspectives, and finding ways to expose issues while proposing constructive solutions. Tomorrow's meeting with Patterson would determine whether my approach had been career-defining or career-ending. Either way, I had learned something important about the kind of lawyer I wanted to be and the impact I hoped to achieve through legal practice. The rain that had marked my first day at Whitmore & Associates had returned, drumming against my apartment windows as Manhattan settled into evening. Whatever Patterson decided tomorrow, I knew that I had represented his interests zealously while maintaining my integrity and contributing to a more equitable resolution of the underlying disputes. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that makes Manhattan feel like the center of the universe. I dressed carefully, choosing my most professional suit, the one that had carried me through law school interviews and bar exam results. Whatever Patterson decided today would shape not just my career at Whitmore & Associates, but my entire future in legal practice. I arrived at the office early, using the quiet morning hours to prepare for what could be either a celebration or a termination. My desk still bore the organized chaos of the Patterson case files, though most of the heavy lifting was now complete thanks to yesterday's successful mediation. "Livia?" Marcus Chen appeared in my doorway at 7:30, carrying his usual morning coffee peace offering. "Heard you had quite a day yesterday. The whole floor is talking about your mediation performance. Is that good or bad?" I asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Depends who you ask. The other junior associates are impressed. Some of the senior partners are intrigued." Jennifer looks like she swallowed something unpleasant. "And Patterson? He's been in meetings with the managing partners since 8 a.m. That's either very good or very bad for you." At 9 a.m. sharp, Jennifer appeared at my door. Her expression was carefully neutral, which somehow felt more ominous than outright hostility. "Conference room A, Patterson, managing partners, and the media law division heads want to see you." Conference room A was Whitmore & Associates' premier meeting space, reserved for major client presentations and significant firm decisions. The mahogany table could seat 30 people, and the walls displayed photographs of the firm's most notable cases and successful outcomes. As I entered, I counted 8 people around the table, more senior attention than any junior associate typically commanded. Patterson sat at the head of the table, flanked by managing partner Charles Whitmore and media law division head Rebecca Santos. The other faces belonged to senior associates and partners whose names I recognized but whose approval I had never needed to court. "Livia, please sit," Whitmore said, gesturing to the chair directly across from Patterson. The formality of the setup suggested this was more than a casual debriefing session. "Mr. Patterson has given us a detailed account of yesterday's mediation," Rebecca Santos began. "Your approach was unconventional." I maintained steady eye contact while choosing my words carefully. "I believed that addressing the legitimate issues raised by the opposing counsel while protecting Mr. Patterson's core business interests was the most effective strategy for achieving a favorable outcome." Patterson leaned forward. "Livia, can I ask you something directly? When you were analyzing my contracts, did you think they were fair?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone in the room understood that my answer would reveal not just my legal analysis, but my fundamental approach to client representation. "Mr. Patterson, I thought your contracts reflected industry practices that have evolved to protect platform investments, but I also recognized that some terms had become more restrictive than necessary to achieve those protections. The mediation allowed us to maintain your essential business interests while addressing legitimate creator concerns. So you thought they were unfair? I thought they were legally defensible but strategically vulnerable. There's a difference between what you can enforce and what you should enforce if your goal is sustainable business relationships. Charles Whitmore made notes on his legal pad. Livia, tell us about your background analysis process. How did you identify the potential problems with Mr. Patterson's position? I opened my portfolio, extracting the research framework I had developed over 3 weeks of document review. I approached the contracts from 3 perspectives: legal enforceability, industry standard practices, and practical business outcomes. My production background helped me understand how these agreements would affect creator behavior and motivation, which informed my assessment of litigation risks. And you concluded that voluntary modifications were preferable to defending existing terms? I concluded that strategic concessions would prevent larger losses while demonstrating good faith that could benefit Mr. Patterson's reputation within the creator community. Patterson smiled for the first time since I had entered the room. Livia, in 30 years of business, I've learned that the best advisors are the ones who tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Yesterday, you told me what I needed to hear. Rebecca Santos spoke up. The mediation settlement saves Patterson Entertainment an estimated $2 million in potential litigation costs and adverse judgments. More importantly, it establishes a framework for improved creator relationships that could prevent similar disputes in the future. Which brings us to why we're all here this morning, Whitmore said. Mr. Patterson has made a request regarding your continued involvement with his legal matters. My heart rate increased despite my efforts to remain calm. This was the moment that would determine whether my unconventional approach had been career-enhancing or career-ending. Patterson reached into his briefcase and withdrew a folder. Livia, I want to offer you something. Patterson Entertainment is expanding our legal department, and we need someone who understands both the creative and business sides of content development. I'd like you to consider joining us as our Director of Legal Affairs. The offer hung in the air like an unexpected gift. A director position at a major entertainment company would typically require years more experience than I possessed, but my unique background had apparently created an unusual opportunity. That's a generous offer, Mr. Patterson. Could I ask about the scope of responsibilities? You'd oversee all creator agreements, platform partnerships, and content licensing deals. Essentially, you'd be responsible for ensuring that our business practices align with both legal requirements and industry best practices. You'd report directly to me and have input on strategic decisions. Jennifer's expression had progressed from neutral to openly shocked. This was clearly not the outcome she had expected from yesterday's mediation. Livia, Rebecca Santos interjected, before you respond to Mr. Patterson's offer, I want you to know that Whitmore and Associates would like to discuss alternative arrangements for your continued employment here. What kind of arrangements? Partnership track acceleration. Typically, associates need 7 to 10 years before partner consideration. Given your unique background and yesterday's performance, we'd be willing to consider a 5-year timeline if you commit to developing our entertainment law practice. 2 significant career opportunities in one morning. I looked around the room at faces that reflected various combinations of surprise, approval, and calculation. 6 months ago, I had been unemployed and uncertain about my professional future. Today, I was choosing between competing offers from prestigious organizations. These are both incredible opportunities, I said carefully. Could I have some time to consider the options? Of course, Patterson said. Though I hope you'll remember that sometimes the best opportunities come from organizations that are willing to take risks on unconventional talent. As the meeting concluded and people began filing out of the conference room, Whitmore asked me to stay behind. Livia, off the record, what do you want to achieve in your legal career? The question required an honest answer. I want to work at the intersection of creativity and commerce, helping to create systems that benefit both individual creators and the platforms that support them. I believe legal practice can be a force for positive change in industries that affect millions of people. And you think you can achieve that better in-house or at a law firm? I think both paths offer different opportunities to make meaningful contributions. At Patterson Entertainment, I'd have direct influence over business practices but limited exposure to industry-wide issues. At Whitmore and Associates, I'd work with multiple clients but have less direct implementation authority. Whitmore nodded thoughtfully. Take your time deciding. Either way, you've made an impression that won't be forgotten. That afternoon, I walked through Central Park, using the physical movement to process the morning's unexpected developments. My phone rang constantly, David Kim wanting details about the meeting, my mother asking if everything was all right, Marcus Chin checking whether I was still employed. Around 4 p.m., I found myself sitting on a bench near the reservoir, watching joggers and dog walkers enjoy the beautiful autumn weather. My Emmy-winning documentary work had often focused on individuals facing difficult choices with significant consequences. Now I was the subject of my own case study about career transitions and professional identity. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Whatever you decide, remember why you went to law school in the first place. What story do you want your career to tell? The question crystallized my thinking. My documentary work had always been about exposing systemic problems and proposing constructive solutions. Both career options offered opportunities to continue that mission, but through different mechanisms and with different spheres of influence. I walked back to my apartment as the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows between the buildings. The Emmy on my shelf caught the late afternoon light, reminding me of past achievements while symbolizing the foundation for future accomplishments. That evening, I called both Patterson and Rebecca Santos to schedule follow-up meetings. I wanted to understand exactly what each opportunity would entail and how they aligned with my long-term professional goals. "Livia," Patterson said when I reached him, "I hope you're seriously considering our offer. You have the potential to transform how entertainment companies approach creator relationships." "I am considering it seriously, Mr. Patterson. I want to make sure I understand how the role would evolve over time and what kind of impact I could realistically achieve." "Fair enough. Let's have dinner tomorrow night. I'll show you exactly what we're building and how you'd fit into those plans." Rebecca Santos was equally enthusiastic when I called her. "Livia, partnership track acceleration is extremely rare. The firm sees significant potential in your approach to complex legal issues. I appreciate the confidence. I'd like to better understand how the entertainment law practice would develop and what kinds of cases I'd be handling." "Absolutely. Let's meet Thursday morning. I'll walk you through our strategic plans for the division and show you some of the matters you'd be working on." As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on the remarkable transformation of my professional circumstances. 6 months ago, I had been starting over after my production company's collapse. Today, I was choosing between opportunities that most lawyers would consider dream positions after decades of practice. The rain had returned, pattering against my windows as I considered the weight of the decisions ahead. Tomorrow's dinner with Patterson and Thursday's meeting with Rebecca Santos would provide the information I needed to make the right choice for my career and my values. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The woman who had walked into Whitmore and Associates 6 weeks ago, uncertain about her place in the legal profession, had proven that unconventional backgrounds could create unexpected value. The Emmy on my shelf no longer represented just past achievements, it symbolized the storytelling skills, investigative instincts, and ethical foundation that would guide whatever path I chose next. My phone buzzed with one final message of the day, this time from Livia Morrison. "Heard about your opportunities. The industry needs more lawyers who remember what it's like to be on both sides. Whatever you decide, stay true to that perspective." I smiled, thinking about how the mediation had brought together opposing sides to find common ground. Whether I chose to work for Patterson Entertainment or continue at Whitmore and Associates, my goal would remain the same: using legal expertise to create more equitable systems that serve both individual creators and the companies that support them. The next morning brought clarity along with the autumn sunshine. I had spent the night thinking about David's question, what story did I want my career to tell? The answer had crystallized during my morning run along the East River, watching the city wake up to another day of possibilities. Patterson's dinner invitation took us to Le Bernardin, where the sophisticated atmosphere provided the perfect backdrop for serious career discussions. He arrived with detailed presentations about Patterson Entertainment's expansion plans and the role he envisioned for their new director of legal affairs. "Livia, we're not just offering you a job," he said over the appetizer course. "We're offering you the opportunity to shape how a major entertainment company approaches creator relationships. Your mediation performance showed us that you understand both sides of these negotiations in ways that traditional corporate lawyers don't." The presentation was impressive. Patterson Entertainment was positioning itself as an industry leader in ethical creator partnerships, partly inspired by our recent mediation success. The company wanted to establish new standards for revenue sharing, rights management, and creator support that could influence industry-wide practices. "What would success look like in this role?" I asked, genuinely intrigued by the scope of the opportunity. "In 5 years, I want other entertainment companies studying our creator agreement models and trying to replicate our approach. I want Patterson Entertainment to be known not just for profitable content, but for treating creators fairly and building sustainable partnerships. And you think my background gives me the credibility to help achieve those goals?" I think your background gives you something more valuable than credibility, authenticity. Creators trust people who've been where they are. Legal departments trust people who understand business realities. You're one of the few people who can speak both languages fluently. Thursday's meeting with Rebecca Santos was equally compelling, though in different ways. The Whitmore and Associates partnership track represented traditional legal prestige and the opportunity to work with multiple clients across various entertainment industry sectors. Livia, your approach to the Patterson mediation demonstrated exactly the kind of innovative thinking we want to cultivate in our entertainment law practice, Rebecca explained. We're seeing increasing demand for lawyers who understand both creative and business perspectives. She showed me case files from potential clients, streaming platforms, production companies, talent agencies, and individual creators, all facing complex legal challenges at the intersection of technology, creativity, and commerce. The partnership track acceleration means you'd have unprecedented influence over case strategy and client development. Within 5 years, you could be leading one of the most dynamic entertainment law practices in the city. What would distinguish our practice from other entertainment law firms? Your perspective. Most entertainment lawyers come from pure legal backgrounds. You bring production experience that allows you to anticipate issues before they become problems and propose solutions that actually work in the real world. Both opportunities offered the chance to make significant impacts, but through different mechanisms. Patterson Entertainment provided direct influence over company policies that affected thousands of creators. Whitmore and Associates offered broader industry influence through multiple client relationships and precedent-setting cases. Friday afternoon, I made my decision. I called Patterson first, knowing that declining his offer would be difficult given his investment in my professional development. Mr. Patterson, I want to thank you for the incredible opportunity you've offered. The Director of Legal Affairs position would be a dream job for many lawyers, and your vision for ethical creator partnerships aligns perfectly with my professional values. I sense a but coming, he said, though his tone remained friendly. But I've decided to stay at Whitmore and Associates and accept their partnership track acceleration. I believe I can have broader industry impact by working with multiple clients and helping to establish legal precedents that benefit the entire entertainment ecosystem. Patterson was quiet for a moment. I'm disappointed, obviously, but I respect your reasoning. The industry needs lawyers who are thinking strategically about systemic issues, not just individual company interests. Mr. Patterson, I hope this doesn't end our professional relationship. I'd love to continue working on Patterson Entertainment matters as external counsel. I'd insist on it. You've earned my trust and respect, Livia. I want you on my legal team regardless of which firm pays your salary. My call to Rebecca Santos was considerably more enjoyable. Livia, that's wonderful news. We're thrilled that you've decided to build your career with Whitmore and Associates. I think you're going to transform how entertainment law is practiced in the city. I'm excited about the opportunity to work with diverse clients and tackle complex industry-wide issues. The partnership track acceleration is incredibly generous. You've earned it. Your work on the Patterson case demonstrated exactly the kind of innovative legal thinking that separates good lawyers from great ones. That evening, I celebrated with David Kim at our favorite restaurant in Brooklyn. He had been my strongest supporter throughout the career transition, and his reaction to my decision was immediate and enthusiastic. Livia, you made the right choice. Working with multiple clients will give you exposure to industry patterns and systemic issues that single company employment couldn't provide. I hope so. It feels like the path that aligns best with my long-term goals. Remember when you were producing that documentary about corporate whistleblowers? You said that the most important stories weren't about individual companies, but about industry-wide practices that needed scrutiny and reform. That's exactly what influenced my decision. I want to work on legal issues that could improve conditions for creators across the entire entertainment ecosystem. And you'll still be working with Patterson Entertainment, so you get to see how policy changes actually implement at the company level. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new office, larger than my original space, with an even better view of the Hudson River, preparing for a deposition in a case that could establish new precedents for creator rights in the streaming era. The Patterson Entertainment mediation had become a model for similar negotiations across the industry, and several other companies had adopted modified versions of our settlement framework. Jennifer Walsh had been surprisingly gracious about my rapid advancement, perhaps recognizing that my success reflected well on the Media Law Division's judgment. Marcus Chen had been promoted to senior associate, partly based on his work supporting my cases. The firm's entertainment law practice had grown substantially, with new clients specifically requesting lawyers who understood production-side perspectives. My desk now displayed both my law degree and my Emmy, representing the convergence of experiences that had shaped my approach to legal practice. The documentary background had taught me to investigate complex systems and identify patterns that others might miss. Law school had provided the tools to translate those insights into actionable legal strategies. My phone rang, interrupting my preparation for the afternoon deposition. The caller ID showed Patterson Entertainment. "Livia, it's Robert Patterson. I have a situation that I think you'll find interesting." "What kind of situation?" "Three major streaming platforms are proposing industry-wide creator agreement standards. They want Patterson Entertainment to participate in developing the framework, and they specifically requested that you be involved in the legal negotiations." I smiled, thinking about how the mediation that had launched my legal career was now creating opportunities to influence industry-wide practices. That sounds like exactly the kind of systemic change work I hope to be doing. "I thought you'd say that. The first meeting is next week. Are you available?" "I'll make myself available." After we hung up, I turned back to my deposition preparation, but my mind was already racing ahead to next week's industry meeting. The opportunity to help establish creator agreement standards across multiple platforms represented exactly the kind of broad impact work that had drawn me to legal practice. The rain that had marked my first day at Whitmore and Associates had long since stopped, replaced by the bright spring sunshine that was streaming through my office windows. Manhattan bustled with its usual energy 40 floors below, filled with creative professionals, business executives, and legal practitioners who were shaping the future of entertainment commerce. My Emmy caught the afternoon light, reminding me of the investigative documentary work that had first exposed me to the intersection of creativity and business. The golden statuette no longer represented just past achievements, it symbolized the storytelling skills and ethical foundation that continued to guide my legal practice. 6 months ago, I had been an unemployed documentary producer uncertain about my professional future. Today, I was a rising legal star working on cases that could transform how the entertainment industry treats individual creators. The transition hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when I doubted whether my unconventional background would be accepted in the traditional legal profession. But the Patterson Entertainment mediation had proven that different perspectives could create better outcomes for everyone involved. My production experience had identified legal vulnerabilities that pure legal training might have missed, while my law school education had provided the tools to translate those insights into effective advocacy strategies. The partnership track acceleration meant that I would have unprecedented influence over case strategy and client development. Within 5 years, I could be leading one of the most dynamic entertainment law practices in the city, setting precedents that would benefit creators and companies across the industry. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, I reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought me to this point. The woman who had been told she would never make it in this industry had not only made it, but was helping to reshape how the industry operated. My Emmy would never make it to another meeting room, it belonged on my shelf as a reminder of where I had come from and the values that would guide where I was going. But the skills, experiences, and perspectives it represented would continue to inform every case I handled, every negotiation I conducted, and every precedent I helped establish. The legal profession had gained more than just another entertainment lawyer. It had gained an advocate who understood both sides of the creative-commercial relationship and was committed to building systems that served everyone's interests more fairly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cases, and new opportunities to prove that unconventional backgrounds could create extraordinary value in traditional professions. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction, knowing that I had found a way to continue the work that mattered most to me, telling stories that could change how entire industries treated the people who made them possible. The Emmy on my shelf gleamed in the late afternoon light, no longer a symbol of past achievements but a foundation for future impact. And in the conference rooms of Whitmore and Associates, my legal briefs would continue the work that my documentaries had started, exposing systemic problems and proposing constructive solutions that could improve conditions for creative professionals across the entertainment ecosystem. The story was far from over. If anything, it was just beginning.